I'd now like to introduce another absolutely amazing fellow. Harry Crouch pretty much single-handedly put together the California Men's Centers. He has recruited, he has recruited to work with him the woman who for decades ran the only shelter in the country that provided services to male victims. So that's an amazing coup. Harry is also the president of the National Coalition for Men. And finally, Harry, he tells me, is CRISPE number 2. And I hope Harry will tell us what exactly a CRISPE number 2 is. Harry, come on up.
See, I had it perfect until Kenyatta got up there and his head was cutting.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody wearing a watch out there? Would somebody wave a hand when I go like 9 minutes so these guys don't throw me off the stage? I appreciate it. So what's CRISPE number 2? I saw one of the guys around here wearing a CRISPE shirt right over here. That purple one says CRISPE on the front of it. About 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, one of my guys, Larry Kirkman, you may have heard of him, came into my office and said, I got this idea. You know, I see other guys come into the men's center here and they've spent $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 going to court trying to see their children. They still haven't seen them. Every time they go, they keep losing custody. He says, I don't want to do that. I want to make a contribution. He says, I want to buy a big bus. And I want to wrap it in purple. And I want to put slogans on it. I want to drive it around the United States. I want to bring other groups together. And I told him his idea sucked. And so he came back a few months later and I thought about it a little bit. We talked a little bit more and I said, okay, let's do it. And so Larry became CRISPE number 1. His son is CRISPE number 1.5. And I pull up the rear at CRISPE number 2. That's how I became CRISPE number 2. Now, why did I start the California Men's Centers? And what I'm going to share with you here today, too, I suspect we've heard a lot over the last day and a half. Does anybody here not know we've got problems? I mean, you're here. Does anybody not know that Bow Wow is a problem? Everybody knows it. So why did I open the center? Because there was no center for men. Anywhere. Bow Wow pumps about $1 billion a year into economies throughout the United States and does everything it can do to make sure there are no programs for men. Matter of fact, in the state of California, in the Health and Human Service Codes, houses the provisions for which organizations can receive state funding to provide services for domestic violence. It's gender neutral, gender inclusive until you get to the definition of a victim, and it's only women and children. Interesting, this last year the gay and lesbian community put a full court press on California in order to get that definition expanded, and it was defeated. And why was it defeated? Because gay men would have opened the door to provide services to heterosexual men. That's the thinking behind the industry of domestic violence. Kenyatta was talking about black men in prison. We've designed a program in California called a tolling program, through which we're going to work with a law school, provide third-year law students the opportunity to go into correctional facilities and actually help men or women complete the documentation to have their child support payments suspended while in prison. We had the support of the District Attorney's Office, the Public Defender's Office, Volunteers in Parole, Juvenile Parole, Adult Probation and Parole, members of Corrections up in Sacramento, and one attorney in the Department of Child Support Services, San Diego, shut it down because it would have cost them money. So those people Kenyatta was talking about languishing in jail languish there today, at least in California, when there's an alternative solution. And we're still working on it, and hopefully next year we're going to have that program installed in California. I wanted to share with you some things that you might not have thought of that you can do to help your own causes wherever you're from. They're not complicated and they don't cost any money. They do take a little bit of time. Everybody who attends this conference, this festival this year, comes from a place where there's something called the Domestic Violence Council. It's either state-based, if it's a large urban area, it'll be urban-based. It could be county-based, borough-based, whatever you've got, wherever you come from. But you can get involved. You can go to their monthly meetings. You can walk in and sit down. When I started going to their monthly meetings, I wore t-shirts. Oh, there's one of our t-shirts. That's one of our Men's Biz t-shirts. I think I just closed that shop that Larry's wearing here. But anyway, that stopped the war of fathers. Maybe not. I started wearing these t-shirts at those meetings, and they didn't think kindly of me, but they didn't throw me out. And my philosophy, my approach with the domestic violence councils is kind of like treating a donkey or a mule. If they don't want to move, first you got to hit them in the head or the ass with a 2x4, and then you got to have a big bushel of carrots out in front of them and do something for them so they don't think you're just there to complain and bitch. And that's what we did. I've been a member of the San Diego Domestic Violence Council for 7 years now, and I've helped them in a number of initiatives. Number one, which was a faith-based initiative, through which we developed the Domestic Violence Information, Education, and Referral Program. We're about 40,000 families in San Diego. We've exported to Oklahoma, and now we're moving it to some other states. And I was instrumental in designing the brochure for that. I brought about 12 copies. They're floating around here somewhere. And what you're going to find in that brochure is nothing based on gender. It's gender inclusive and gender neutral. By your participation in a local domestic violence council or something like that, you can help change the lexicon they use. There are no more gender-specific domestic violence council brochures or pamphlets floating around San Diego. They're all gender inclusive and gender neutral. If you guys have any attorneys you can use, we've got a couple. We sue people. In the case of Woods against the County of Los Angeles, the attorney is Mark Angelucci. You can Google his name. He'll pop up everywhere you can think of. Young attorney, maybe one of the best appellate attorneys in the state of California. He's now working above our men's center. He moved to San Diego to work with us in part. In the Woods versus Los Angeles, he was just up in Sacramento 3 weeks ago making oral arguments before the Supreme Court, or the Appellate Court of California, with respect to our suit against domestic violence shelters for discriminatory treatment. We also incorporated in that suit, we're suing the Department of Corrections for providing parenting programs to women in prison, but not fathers in prison. And we've got 10 times more fathers in prison than we do mothers. We're going to win that suit. We were the first organization using Mark Angelucci to get a man freed from paternity fraud in the state of California. We were the first organization to sue a woman and get a judgment of $48,000 against her for committing paternity fraud. You know what, I'm going to talk about the definition of violence. A lot of people think domestic violence is defined by the VAWA. It only has to do with battery. It's not. If you take a look at the legal definition of domestic violence, what you're going to find is it talks about emotional abuse and it talks about financial abuse. It talks about other forms of abuse, and I don't care what definition is and what state. But what the industry doesn't want to talk about, they don't want to talk about paternity fraud being a form of domestic violence. They don't want to talk about parental alienation being a form of domestic violence. They don't want to talk about false accusations being a form of domestic violence. Now, if you add all those up, ladies and gentlemen, which gender experiences the most domestic violence? There's not even an argument. And that's why the domestic violence industry doesn't want to talk about it, because the Violence Against Women Act is central to everything they do. It's central not only to the domestic violence industry, but the child protective services, elder abuse, child abuse, and believe it or not, animal abuse. Get this. In San Diego County, and I swear to God this is true, we have a woman on our county board of supervisors that pushed through an initiative to where now if domestic violence is committed and there's a pet in the home, the pet is entitled to free services at the nearest pet shelter, including, are you ready for this? Psychological counseling. Now, can men in San Diego County get any shelter services from a women's program? What's your guess?
The kennel.